Hi, Patricia. You don't have to show up, just saying hello. How you doing, Milo?
I have an office again.
How's the house?
Yeah,
Is it great?
it is. It is great.
Yay.
I have no complaints. Pretty much everything is, I think, is nature intended.
That's fantastic.
And
You look happy. Tired, but happy.
I have not been this sore. I'm gonna say in 3 years. I have.
Good.
Yeah, but no, the stars have aligned.
Yay.
And all is well. My apologies for neglecting to clean the coffee maker. I typically do. I'm sorry if it's caused concern.
Well, it's gone now. So, yeah.
No, but like, just somebody could have been like, "Hey, Gitch, help us out."
I told everybody at one of the meetings recently, I said, people got to start cleaning up. Otherwise, I'm going to get rid of it.
Yeah, okay. You know, I remember that meeting. I thought that, but all right.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
can't ask people in the office to clean up after everybody else. It's just,
but I mean, I get that, and I don't think anybody expects that.
but I also can't let coffee sit there, which happens over the weekend. It gets moldy. It's gross.
Well, yeah, but you're known for microwaving old coffee. I thought that was kind of your preference.
Yeah, but I bring my own coffee. So
Yeah, I know. I felt bad. You used to drink mine.
I used to drink, I drank whatever coffee was there. It's true, but that was before, those were in the before times.
That's right. That is true. That is true.
The before times were pleasant and indiscriminate. Yeah. But I'm willing to engage in a discussion about what would be required to get the coffee pot back. I am not an unreasonable despot. I am a benevolent despot.
Sounds like allow my nerd to come out. It sounds like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign in order to reacquire the coffee.
If you want to put things, I don't know enough Dungeons and Dragons to
travel many moons to the ruin. Defeat the evil bean fairy.
Cruel despot. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's here in my drawer where I keep it captive. I know. I don't think
Right.
I've had to do that in the 10 years that this is my 10th year. I've never had to do that before.
I should hope not.
No. Yeah.
I should hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want us to have nice things. I want people to have coffee.
No, and but you, yeah, later time.
Yeah. We'll talk about it later. I'm going to go off screen and try to use the facilities
I should do the
before
same thing.
anyone else comes in.
I should do the same thing. But
All right, Mel, I'm leaving you in charge of letting people in for a few minutes. Hi, the person who just came in, Danielle, I just wanted to check that I know, are you Miss Johnson from the Johnson versus Auger case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to change your name on here so I can keep track of who's who.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Commissioner Dusan. I'm going to get it right today, all day. Hi,
Hey, how are ya?
I'm good. How's the computer working?
I everything's groovy. I just can't
Yay!
remember if I logged in on this. So I'm logged into my laptop for the meeting, is that right? And then I have all the packages stuff on this thing.
Awesome.
That's the way we're set up, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Great.
I'm feeling practically hip to the jive.
I think that's exactly what you are.
I hope your family is well. The kiddos are probably taller than you by now.
They are. They are 16 and 18 and 20.
Oh my word.
I know. And your son, how's he?
He's doing very, very well, thank you. Yeah.
Is he here in town?
He is here with me.
Great.
I'll tell you real quick. He happened to be in Shanghai working on his master's
Yeah.
when COVID hit and he had to come home. So he's been
Oh.
finishing his master's remotely with Shanghai University and working part-time. He gets his thesis done, I think, in July. So
Wow.
he's doing
That's
well.
amazing. I'm glad he was able to get home.
Yes, praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Then
And
he'll
how's
be
your
back
daughter?
in
Is
the job market?
is she teaching somewhere nearby?
My daughter, you remember that? Huh, cool, thank you. She is, yes, she's loving Buckfield. And,
Buckfield. Wow.
thinking about making a change before Roman starts middle school. So that'd probably be around this time next year. But
Middle school? What?
yeah, well, he's in, what is he, 4th grade now?
Wow.
And middle school is 6. Yeah, so she'll start looking
Yeah.
sometime next year.
Yeah. Wow. Gigi rides again.
Doot, 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 doot. I just had a
Cool.
wonderful weekend with him. I think I took him Thursday. Yeah, it's good.
It's fun now that everyone's getting vaccinated to be able to do stuff that
Yes,
seems
praise
like
the Lord again.
before. I was downtown this weekend. It was packed.
Yeah, people were out. I
Yeah.
swear, the playgrounds were full.
Yeah. It makes you feel like there's hope.
Yes, we may
Yeah.
get back to normal soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Playground full of kids and parents. Well, and grandkids and parents, but we all had our mask on. So
That's good. I was going to say, I was walking down Commercial Street and I would say half the people, it seemed like half the people had masks and half the
Wow.
people either didn't have a mask or it was pulled down. And I was like, huh, interesting.
It's so easy to get overconfident, you know.
Yeah.
My antibodies have antibodies, so I'm
Do they?
pretty,
Okay.
I've had it and then I've had the shots.
Oh, you had it. Wow.
Oh, I had it pretty bad, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's scary.
Went through my household. My son got it. Had a woman upstairs at the time. She's the one who actually got it and bought it to us. But anyway, we made it
Wow.
through. So
Knock on wood. Thank goodness.
mhm.
Mel wants to know, did you get the chargers from the Amazon order?
I did. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Very much.
Good, good,
Everything is fantastic.
good. Excellent. Couldn't be happier. Good. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go get my cup of tea.
Do it. I'm going to drink some coffee. I'll be nicer to everyone. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Alex.
In here?
Mel, I muted you.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know I wasn't muted. My mom just came in talking about the
Hi,
dog.
Mom. Oh, Barbara, you're in your office. Hello. So close, but so far. Oh. Hi, Ed. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Deb.
Good morning. Um, um, I'll send you a note.
Okay. Jeff. Sorry, Commissioner Ashby. I said Commissioner Dusson, Commissioner Whitworth, Commissioner David. I will be very serious and formal.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Then we won't know it's you, Amy.
Nice, thank you. Appreciate that, Ed. I feel seen.
Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Fredette. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
For a Monday morning.
Yes, so far so good. Just as a heads up, because you haven't been in one of these meetings for a while, I'm going to keep you on mute until your case is up.
All right. And I have Tom here too. And so can I put myself on mute too, just to make sure that we can talk privately?
Yes, I hope you
All
do. Yes,
All right. No, perfect. Thank you. Good to
thanks.
see you this morning.
You too.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mary McKay, one of the two interpreters. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Amy.
Who's your team? Is it Meryl?
Merrill.
Okay, I haven't seen her yet.
Nope.
Unsurprising. She will show up at the last possible minute.
I was going to say a little more politically correct. If she happens to be delayed and you'd like to begin, you feel free to. She will join
Thank you.
us.
And I haven't seen Mr. Damien on here yet either.
Okay.
And just so the commissioners know, and actually I haven't seen any of the respondents' attorneys, if we do have all the parties for the last case on the hearing agenda, Damien versus, it's PA 190138. If we do get all of the parties present and the interpreters, then we might take that case out of order, take it first, just so we can be done with the interpreters soonest. But I don't see any of the parties on here yet, so that doesn't appear to be an issue as of now. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. I'll change my name.
Okay, you're MPM. Good morning, Ms. McCann. I know you're still connecting. Mr. Smistowski, it has been a while. I know you're connecting to audio.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm too early, obviously. Amy, it's Nicole Lorenzati.
Aha.
It's my first time doing a Zoom commission
Oh,
meeting.
there you are. Okay. I was looking for your box. You are early, but that's actually, it's okay because you guys are the second case.
Okay. Do you want me to zoom out and come back? I mean, it's my first time doing the Zoom
Oh,
commission
well,
meeting,
what-
so you tell me.
I can tell you what most people do is they just keep themselves on Zoom and their camera off until their case is up.
Okay,
That's what most people do.
perfect.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to mute you. Hi, Mr. Auger. You are muted. Still muted. That's okay.
If she can hear you.
There
Okay,
you
can you hear
go.
me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Well, you got some feedback there, so thank you for muting yourself.
So, Amy, this is Mary speaking. If Mr. Damien and the other parties aren't present when you begin, I'll just put video off. and I'll keep
Understood.
waiting and watching for someone
Understood.
that I can identify shows, and then I'll begin interpreting.
That sounds great. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Mary.
Actually, I should ask if that's okay, because I don't know if you need it, if you need it interpreted anyway, because you're recording. Do you need the agenda and all of that interpreted?
Not if there is no one who's an ASL user here.
Okay.
Personally, I would like it, but that's just me because I'm selfish. Oh, and there's Meryl Troop. Hello, Meryl.
Okay, so
Look at me remembering to unmute before I say hello.
Very impressive. And yeah, it's 8:30. That's about what I thought. Yep. Okay.
okay, so Meryl, just to catch you up, I was just asking Amy that if Mr. Damien and his parties aren't present when they begin, we'll just take our video off and we'll wait and watch. And when and if and hopefully he should appear, one of us will reappear and begin interpreting.
Okay.
It was
And
technically the last case, but Amy mentioned, depending on where they are in the stream of things, that when he's present and if all the other parties, his representative are present, she may move him out of order.
okay.
And you and I
As
can
of
talk.
now, Mr. Damien's not here. We have an attorney. We have attorneys for some of the respondents for that case, but Mr. Damien, as far as I know, is not here.
Oh, and is he represented? I'm sorry. I think
He is not. Nope.
Okay. It was the respondents.
Right.
Representatives.
Good morning, Attorney Hoffman.
Did we get started? It's 8:31.
Yes.
Good morning, Executive Director Sneerson.
Good morning. I'm Deb Whitworth, and on behalf of my fellow commissioners, welcome you to this meeting of the Maine Human Rights Commission. Before we proceed with the business of today, I'm asking each of you who may have an electronic device, cell phone, pager, etc., to ensure that they're silenced now. You should have an agenda that was made available to you with a link from the commission office. The consent, it includes the consent agenda, and that is a listing of cases in which no written arguments were made to the commission in the allotted time period. The commission will vote on those cases and they will not be considered further today. And Amy, you have several things that you'd like to say.
So many things that I would like to say always. But related to the topic at hand, before there is a motion to adopt the agendas, there are two memos that I would like to bring to the commission's attention, because if the requests that are mentioned in them are granted, it will change the agendas. So we have in two cases memos where complainants are seeking to withdraw their complaints. Both cases are on the consent agenda. Both cases are reasonable grounds housing cases. And as I said, I gave you a memo on each of the cases describing the circumstances. Normally, I do not recommend that we grant those requests once we have finished an investigation. But in these two cases, because of the circumstances, I do recommend that you grant both requests and allow both complainants to withdraw. So if you do that, first, I need you to act on each of those requests, but also just be aware, we will have an amended consent agenda because those two cases will be removed from the consent agenda. So with that having been said, if the commission would address the two requests, that's the first thing is addressing the requests.
I move that we grant the request to withdraw complaint H20-0440A/B and the request to withdraw H20-0486.
Second.
So it's been moved in second. Is there any discussion? Sorry, Deb.
That's okay. Okay, no discussion. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. So those requests are granted. So then the consent agenda that we will be voting on will be amended. And those two cases, which are in the middle of the consent agenda, will be removed. So then the next item for you is adopting the agenda and the amended consent agenda.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Oops.
I heard Jill make a motion.
I move adoption of the agenda and the consent agenda.
Okay.
The amended consent agenda.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
2, 3, 4. Thank you.
Now we move on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the March 15th commission meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And now the director's report. Amy.
Yes, good morning. So for the usual monthly reports, you have a personnel memo, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. For compliance, we have 14 reasonable grounds cases that are currently in conciliation. That is a record in my time at the commission. We have 2 successful conciliations since the last meeting, 1 unsuccessful conciliation that actually is settling post-conciliation. But I have 2 conciliation agreements for the commission to review and approve. You have one in E18-0503, McVetti versus Thomaston Place Auction Galleries. And you have one in PA 19-0405, Lizotte versus Hannaford Broadway. So at this time, I would be looking for a motion or motions to approve those conciliation agreements.
Any reason why we can't do both in the same motion? Or at least try both in the same motion?
I think that's fine.
Then so moved that we approve both the conciliation agreements in E180503 and in PA 190405.
second,
Is there any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Sure. Thank you very much. For investigation, in what month is it? So for March, we had 62 new charges. I administratively dismissed 17 cases. You get a report of, it says administrative dismissals, but there's a lot of right to sues on there, so I don't really count those as ADs. For predetermination settlements in the month of March, there were 24 with benefits of just over $1 million to complainants. For quarterly reports, you have a quarterly report that says pending inventory. It shows that as of now, we have 676 cases pending. You have a finance report from Melody, which also has the additional quasi-independent report that we're required to do. All quasis are required to do. And you also have a quarterly report on resolutions, which shows that in the third quarter of the fiscal year, there were essentially 39 settlements, either withdrawals with benefits or settlements through our mediation program, with benefits of just over $1.4 million to complainants. So that's the quarterly report. Oh, no, and you also have a quarterly training and education report that shows that our staff participated in or delivered 11 events. But also in addition to that, I noted on the bottom that during the quarter, the entire staff attended multiple trainings, every single person, for our new internal and soon to be, not soon, hopefully planning to be external electronic data management and portal system. We have a huge jump on getting all the staff on this electronic data management system with the help of Ali Dabbs, who's not on here, but who's been working to develop it along with Melody and our vendor, and all the staff have been trained on it. We also had many of us, Barbara, me, and Melody have all presented at and attended multiple legislative hearings, which will be continuing. So then for new business, I would ask that we take litigation after executive session. And for new business, there's not a lot. The legislative process about our budget has been very confusing, but so far so good. The budget process this time has been different than it's been in the 10 years that I've been here, in that the legislature approved a sort of a bare bones baseline budget for the next biennium, 21, 22, 22, 23, and then they will be going back during what is now a special session to talk about individual agency requests that had been in the proposed biennial budget. So we will be talking, hopefully, with the Appropriations Committee about specific things that Judiciary had approved for our agency. So far it's good in that we will continue operating. So that's good. None of our other bills that we introduced or that relate to the Maine Human Rights Act have been heard yet in legislative hearings. Hopefully there will be time during this session to hear them, since we spent all of the last session getting them bumped. So we are really hopeful that we will get them heard this time. I believe we will be having a new commissioner appointed. I've heard from the governor's office, they have an appointment. I saw something online, but it hasn't, because the legislature adjourned, and the committees have been back, but the Senate hasn't been back. It has to be published in the Senate calendar, and it hasn't been. So it hasn't been, I guess, formalized yet, but there is a new appointment for a Republican on the commission, which is the seat that is vacant. Basically not a Democrat. Julie Ann O'Brien from Augusta. So that's all I know. And then finally, commissioners, just FYI, we are hoping to have a brief session after today's meeting to talk about I mean, we don't do a ton of commissioner training, which we should be doing more because you're all volunteers. So we thought we would start today just talking about process in a training of what happens before the cases get to you. I know the commissioners who have been here for a while have a sense, but we thought it would be good to talk in some more detail. So hopefully you have a little time that we can do that in after today's meeting. I don't have a time in particular in mind, so we can talk about that in a bit. Or we can talk about it now if you want, whichever. Because we have 3 minutes. Or you can take a break and go to the bathroom. You know, it's all crazy. But that's all I have.
So let's adjourn for 3 minutes. We'll be back at 8:45.
I made Barbara laugh. Mission accomplished. And I think I saw Commissioner Doosan laugh as well.
Yes, you did.
Excellent.
Yes, you did.
Mission accomplished for the day.
When Mr. Damien's case comes on and the commission is having their discussion around it, can you please remind them to identify themselves as they're speaking? Because with so many people present on Zoom, I can't catch quickly enough who's the gentleman, who are speaking.
Yeah.
And anyone. So thank you.
Yes, we will
If
do
they
that.
can remember.
Thank you for the reminder, Mary.
Okay. Again, I'm not sure if I was clear. I'm sorry, but I'm really only referencing when Mr. Damien's case starts.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll waddle through the rest of it, but okay.
Yes.
Did you say specifically to that case?
No, I gotcha.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
Is it Monday?
I don't know. It might be.
Okay.
Okay, it's 8:45, so we'll call the meeting back to order. The remaining cases on the agenda today are coming before the commission to determine if reasonable grounds exist to believe that unlawful discrimination has occurred. The commissioners have received and reviewed investigators' reports and any written submissions submitted within the allotted time. No new information or any written materials may be accepted today. Cases will be called in order on the accepted agenda unless we determine that it's best to take them out of order, in which case we will. As I call each case, the party who has submitted a written argument will be called to the podium to provide the most relevant arguments to the case. The time is limited to 10 minutes unless we are providing an accommodation and need to grant additional time. Time may be reserved to rebut opposing arguments, but the time limit of 10 minutes or the time that we have determined may not be exceeded. Procedural rules of the commission specify that your arguments may address only 1, relevant factual errors, 2, relevant omissions from the report of facts submitted during the investigation, or 3, relevant issues and questions concerning interpretation of the law. The commission allows parties who do not disagree with the investigator's report to rebut comments made by the opposite party. Please be advised that commissioners may ask questions, and we would ask that you introduce yourself as you are called to make your presentation. Thank you. So,
I'm sorry, Deb, just sorry, before
yes.
you go on, I would ask folks, if there are witnesses or third parties involved in your case, please don't reference them by name in the reports. We've given them a pseudonym or something to use instead. The Maine Human Rights Act requires that we maintain confidentiality of third parties. Thanks.
Okay. So we're taking the first case as it is, Amy? Okay. So our first case, Bridget Fitzgerald v. Unum. Is there anybody here for the complainant?
Yes, I am here for the complainant, Allie Tozier.
Okay, you'll have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Allie Tozier and I represent Bridget Fitzgerald. She used to work at Unum, the respondent in this case, and the respondent is a company that offers a disability or helps people that have to take disability from work. When complainant worked at Unum, she was in the customer service field, so she was on a team of other people that would take calls. So if a call couldn't be taken by somebody, it would be picked up by somebody else. And this particular job was extremely regimented. So everything was monitored and timed, including how long the calls took, how long they took after the call to write the notes, the accuracy, the customer service, all of that. And complainant needed an accommodation because she had a disability, which I'll talk about. And what she needed primarily was flexibility in her disability. Again, I'll get into that a little bit more, but the point is that respondent actually gave her requested accommodation in October of 2018. And then promptly took it away. And right after they took it away, they put her on a performance improvement plan. And on the performance improvement plan, she actually improved and she did a great job, and that's all documented. And then how did they reward her for that? They actually extended the performance improvement plan for 2 months. And they cited a reason that was really just her having to be out of work for her FMLA leave, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And then they fired her just a few weeks after they extended the leave, after she had performed well on the performance improvement plan. So talking about her disability a little bit, without going into specifics because it's confidential and this is a public forum, but her disability was the kind of disability that she couldn't be on the clock every single second that she was expected to be on the clock. And there are medical records that have dates June 7th, June 13th, October 11th, November 2nd, November 28th, and December 13th. Those are all records from her doctor that if you look at them, you'll see that the reason why she needs flexibility is there, and what she needed and what all those documents said was she needed to be able to take time between 15 to 20 minutes every 2 to 4 hours to collect herself, to either go to the bathroom or to go to her car. I will say that her disability would manifest emotionally and physically, and it wouldn't manifest the same every single time. So what she really needed was that flexibility. And again, this is well documented. Now, she was given one accommodation back in April 2018 when she first requested an ADA accommodation and accommodation for her disability. And that was one continuous 30-minute break that could not be broken up. And that didn't serve her. It didn't meet her needs because it didn't allow for that flexibility. And again, all those documents, those medical records were given to Unum after they gave her that 30-minute block that she couldn't break up. So she was trying to tell them repeatedly that she needed that flexibility. And so she was granted it. Like I said, instead of the 30 minutes, they gave her they gave her 20 minutes every 2 hours, but then they took it right back just a week later without explaining why, without proving undue hardship. In fact, the evidence shows that after they rescinded that, there's internal communications that say you need to do an analysis of if that's even an undue hardship. So it shows that they couldn't show that was actually an undue hardship. And then what happened was she was put on this performance improvement plan, by the way, right after she got promoted and got a raise. And then she did well. In fact, when she was told about how she did during her performance improvement plan, she was told that her metrics were the best that they had ever been in 2017 or 2018. And then they said, we're not going to take you off of it. We're going to extend it. She was upset. She said, why? I just did well. You just told me. They said, well, you didn't have enough call time. Now, the reason she didn't have enough call time is because she had to take some leave during that PIP and she had intermittent FMLA that she had to take. The reason why she had FMLA leave is because she didn't get her accommodation granted. So she had no choice but to try to get intermittent FMLA leave. She would never have had to do the FMLA leave if she had been given her reasonable accommodation request for her disability. And by the way, when she took the intermittent FMLA leave, which she had, a limited bucket of, she could call the call out line at 5 p.m. the next day and get whatever time she needed approved. And like I said, her disability came on suddenly. So she couldn't tell ahead of time. She couldn't call her supervisor and say, I'm going to have an episode. So she was upset that they extended her leave, and they said that it was because of not having enough call time. She said she was out on leave, and then she said she felt like she was being punished, and that's written by Unum in their own notes on the 9th. And then on the 21st, she was late. She had FMLA leave. She thought it was covered, and then they fired her on January 21st, she was late because of an episode. She had FMLA left in her bank, and they fired her. And so that was in retaliation for needing and requesting the leave, for her disability. So for those reasons, the investigator was mistaken when he found that there were no reasonable grounds that discrimination or retaliation occurred here under the Maine Human Rights Act. And I'll also say that Unum tries to argue that it would have been an undue hardship because she wanted paid breaks, but she never requested paid breaks. She requested unpaid breaks, and her doctor notes are pretty clear that nothing says that she requested to be paid. She just needed an intermittent leave during the day to take the break, and she wouldn't have needed it every single time. I mean, it was just that flexibility that was needed. And I don't know if you guys have any questions, but that's the overview for what happened. And again, I just want to remind you that she was forced to take the family and medical leave. She wouldn't have even needed to do that if she had had that flexibility from her ADA accommodation request. So there's at least an even chance here that a jury would find that this was discriminatory behavior on Unum's part, especially because they're a company that is supposed to be all about helping people with disabilities. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Just so you know, you'll have a little bit under 3 minutes left for rebuttal when we come back. Yep. But first, we'll go through the commissioners in order of seniority on the commission. And see if they have any questions for each person presenting. Commissioner Whitworth, questions at this time? You are muted, so I can't.
Sorry, there's background noise outside.
Yeah.
So it says in the materials that complainant was discharged for continued unsatisfactory attendance, and then we also say that in July 2018, Manager 3 observed complainant using her time inefficiently by taking too much time between phone calls and spending time on her cell phone. Also noticed complainant was frequently late in arriving to work and took longer breaks. So it would seem then, and I don't want to read too much into this, that respondent was trying to work with complainant, but on the surface, it looks as though she's trying to take advantage. Do you dispute that?
Yeah, I do dispute that. So when I talked to her about that cell phone comment, she said there might have been 1 or 2 times when she had to look at her cell phone quickly to respond to something, but it wasn't often. And she wanted her job. She actually had a goal to move to the long-term disability department. So she was very concerned about not getting in trouble and doing everything right, and she wasn't abusing her time, and so that she completely disagrees with that. And if it goes to trial, she'll explain that wasn't the case. She wasn't when she was late sometimes, and that's documented, but the reason that she was late relates to her disability, and it wasn't her abusing the break time at all.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Whitworth?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner, I hate it when you guys move on my screen. Commissioner Ashby.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Whitworth's questions, you just indicated that the complainant, her absences or her being late at work were a function of her disability, but I know in the findings of our investigator that in January of 2019, on the 21st and the 23rd, there were absences, and the investigator found that the complainant never asserted that her absences on the 21st or 23rd were related to any disability. And complainant did not request the time as protected leave. Do you dispute that finding, or?
Yes, I dispute it. I'd love to talk about that. Thank you for asking that question. So the reason I dispute that finding from the investigator is because she was trying to self-accommodate because she didn't get the actual accommodation that she had requested multiple times through her doctors. And so one way that she did that self-accommodation was to take, when she had an episode, take that time as FMLA, intermittent leave. But remember, she had a very limited amount of that in a bucket that she had to be careful. And she knew that that sometimes if she asked the system for time to be PTO, in retrospect, sometimes that would work. She would put it in the system and it would say accepted or not, even if it was just from 30 minutes before she had learned this. And so that morning on January 21st, she had an episode in the morning. It caused her to be about 30 minutes late to work because she was trying to control herself and get better, which is part of her disability. And she knew that she had FMLA leave left. She knew that. And again, she could have called the next day at 5 p.m. by the next day at 5 p.m. and that would have been covered. And that had been her practice over, the past year to do that, to accommodate herself as much as she could. And she was concerned that she only had about 6 hours left. So she tried to get that 30 minutes or so covered as PTO time. And she put it in the system, and the system came back and she thought that it said it was approved. If she thought that, and I think I think it maybe wasn't approved, but the system to her, she thought it was. So if it had said denied, she would have easily been able to call the FMLA line and have that covered, as she had done many times before. She thought it was approved. And so then on the 23rd, she also was a little bit late, but she was also going to get that covered as FMLA leave. Again, she had until the next day, but she didn't have a chance to do that. She was called into a meeting. They didn't even make eye contact with her. It was clear by their demeanor from her perspective that they just wanted to fire her. And she tried to explain that, I would have gotten it covered as FMLA leave. I thought the PTO was approved, and there really wasn't any inquiry. There really wasn't any working with her or talking to her. And she said she felt like their mind was made up. And so she didn't say the word, I have this disability, and go into the specifics of it in that particular meeting. But again, she had sent UNA multiple documents over the course of since April 2018, and it had been well established that she had this disability. They even granted her request and then took it away. So that's what happened, and that's why I dispute that finding.
So Unum is a very large company. It's kind of an awesome burden to impose upon the employer if all of its employees start self-accommodating, though, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree? This employee is asking, has a lot of expectations of the employer if this is her excuse.
I don't understand your question. The law is that the company has to give reasonable accommodations unless they can show undue hardship, and then they also can't discriminate or retaliate against an employee or fire them for requesting or using leave. And the circumstances show, especially because she had just performed better than she had ever performed in her metrics for the last 2 years. So the evidence shows that they fired her in a way that was discriminatory for taking her leave or needing this leave. That because again, she's self-accommodated by taking the FMLA intermittent leave, but it's on Unum to know that she had this disability, and that because she told them, and they're also, that's the law, that they're supposed to know that based on all of these communications given to them. And again, she did explain that she would have gotten the time covered under FMLA. So that is her saying, I have a disability and this was a disability related problem, or else she wouldn't have said, I would have called the FMLA line and gotten it covered as medical. That's implied. So it doesn't matter that she didn't use the actual word disability. Many cases have come out with the employees don't have to use those magic words. I have this disability. I mean, she implied it by saying I would have gotten it covered under FMLA.
Thank you.
Commissioner David, any questions?
Yes, Attorney Tozer, as I understand it, the accommodation that she requested and that she had for a period of time was the ability to take 20 minutes every 2 hours. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are some doctor's notes that say 15 to 20 minutes every 2 to 4 hours, and some say 20 minutes every 2 hours. The accommodation they granted, that Unum granted, was up to 20 minutes every 2 hours, but the words "as needed" are there every single time. So I want to make it clear that this was not, that this was not the situation where she would have actually been out of work for 20 minutes every single 2 hours. That wasn't the situation, and it wasn't presented that way.
My question is, how does that give her a blanket authority to be late? You've said twice in your presentation that she was late and that was a result of her disability.
I'm not saying that she had a blanket authority to be late in exactly that way, though. So let me explain a little bit more. The nature of her disability would be that she could have an episode and it would come on suddenly. And sometimes it didn't happen every morning, but sometimes she would get to work, or right before she got to work, she'd have an episode and she would need, maybe, as the doctor's note said, 15 minutes or 20 minutes max to get herself ready mentally. And some of it was physical, by the way. Sometimes she had to, go and handle stuff physically, and I won't go into the details of that. But if it happened at the beginning of the day, then that would be why she would not be able to clock in right on time and start taking the calls. This is about her being locked in and being able to take the phone calls. So that is not necessarily, I mean, that's how it would be essentially an excuse for being late. I mean, she was late sometimes, but she got it covered under her FMLA intermittent leave because it was related to her disability. So it wasn't just a blanket, okay, for her to be tardy and just wake up late and not worry about being on time. That's not the situation at all. This is related to her having episodes and physically and emotionally not being able to start right away once in a while and needing that protected time.
There are 2 or 3 managers that are reviewing her with the performance improvement plans and all finding the same deficits. Is that not a fair summation?
Yeah, no, because she was, before this all came to the surface about her need for an accommodation, because she was working with her doctors to figure it all out in that April, May, June, and that's why you see all the medical records really starting after April 2018. There was a time before that where she was just struggling and having these problems and hadn't really figured out exactly what was going on yet with her with her doctor. So during that time, she was late and she was tardy, but it wasn't just because she was being irresponsible. It was because she was struggling with this disability that she had, and she was trying to figure it out. And so she got in trouble for that, and she got put on performance plans for that. And then she finished them and completed them, and she spoke with her manager about that at the time, but she didn't use the word disability. She just said, "I'm really struggling," and they worked on that. So most of what UNIM is pointing to is really that period of time before all of it kind of got into this realm of accommodation and needing to help her perform the essential functions of her job with this accommodation. So that's more of the context of that. And again, I mean, she was promoted on November 4th, 2018. She was promoted and she was given a pay raise. And that was after she had the issues before her doctors got involved. And so after she was promoted and got a pay raise, which you probably wouldn't do to somebody who isn't performing well, then they put her on the PIP for the reasons that I explained about she was going over her break times because she couldn't get back from the bathroom exactly on time. She was like 30 seconds late, sometimes a minute late. And she didn't have that flexibility because her accommodation was taken away from her. So that's why it really boils down to her disability and her need for this accommodation, that they just didn't prove undue hardship, and they were fed up with her for needing an accommodation.
Commissioner sorry.
Oh, that's all. Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Sorry.
Those were my questions. I'm done.
Okay. Sorry, I have to stop talking at the same time as you. Commissioner Dusan, any questions for Ms. Tozer?
Don't have additional questions. No, thank you.
Okay. So now we will turn, I'm going to mute you, Allie, and now we're going to turn to Ms. McCann. Nope, you're muted. I can't unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was muted in two places, not one. both my phone and my computer. So I apologize. You'd think after a year of this, we would figure this out. Nope. So good morning. My name is Ellen McCann. I am counsel for respondent UNIM group, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about accommodations and what accommodations were given in this case, because all reasonable accommodations were given in this case. But what I want to focus on really is what we're supposed to be talking about today. And that is that really the failure to accommodate case is time barred. It was found so by the investigator, and even in the opposition, Ms. Fitzgerald actually admits to the fact that the failure to accommodate claims are time barred. And she in fact goes as far to say that she never asked for a failure to accommodate case, or she never claimed that in this matter, that she was really just challenging the termination and the reasons for the termination. Yet we just spent quite a bit of time talking about accommodations, which again, I'm happy to do. I'm very confident that I can explain to you that UNIM gave every reasonable accommodation that was requested. And so I'd like to focus really on the issues surrounding the termination. And then again, if there are any questions about accommodation, I'm happy to do those, and I'll touch on those a little bit as well as I go through. But I think what we really need to focus on right now is the termination itself and the retaliation claim that comes out of the termination, because those are the only issues that really we should be talking about today, based not only on the investigator's report that the other claims are time barred, but also the admissions that are made in the opposition themselves. So as found by the investigator here, after a very thorough investigation in which both parties were given ample opportunity to submit written documentation, as well as having telephone conversations where both sides were able to tell their sides of the story and were given ample opportunity to do so, the investigator concluded correctly that Ms. Fitzgerald was terminated for legitimate non-discriminatory reasons. And I will talk about her performance in a minute, but this is not a woman who had good performance. This is a woman who didn't meet metrics for all of 2017 and all of 2018. So while her metrics might have been getting slightly better, they were never good. Yes, she was promoted at some point, but that was a promotion that everyone who left the training environment and moved into what we call the floor received a promotion because they were moving into a different role. So she was terminated here because she was late to work twice after being on a performance improvement plan for being late to work. That, among many other performance issues. That performance improvement plan clearly stated any additional tardies would result in termination. And when she was late to work, she wasn't just late, she failed to follow any of the company policies and procedures for reporting in late. She never told her manager she was late. In fact, she didn't tell him she was late even after the fact. She never told him. He didn't even know she was late. She also didn't follow the company's reporting notice. So she didn't call out, she didn't let anyone know. She reported to work very late, and then after reporting to work late, several hours later, she submitted a retroactive request for paid time off. The policy is clear that employees are not given same-day PTO. Those requests will not be granted. And even if she could have somehow requested same-day PTO, she didn't request it before the start of her shift. She requested it hours after she was supposed to work. So that was a well-established, uniformly applied policy that she violated while she was already on what we call a PIP, or a performance improvement plan. And it wasn't until after she filed this charge of discrimination that she alleged that she was late because of a disability. And I think it's very important to note, and several of the commissioners pointed this out, she had FMLA time available to her that she could have used that day if in fact she was ill. She had the time available. She knew how to request FMLA. She had done it numerous times. She knew the process for doing so. And she had until 5 o'clock the day after being late to call in FMLA. So if she really was prevented from calling in before the start of the shift, she could have called it in by 5 o'clock the day after. One thing that Ms. Tozier didn't mention is she was late on the 21st. She had until 5 p.m. on the 22nd to call it in. She never did. She knew how to do that. She knew what the requirements were. And I think it's really important, and I hate to be hyper technical here, but the FMLA regulations clearly required her to do that. The FMLA regulations, and I'll quote just for a second, please indulge me. When an employee seeks leave due to an FMLA qualifying reason for which the employer has previously provided FMLA protected leave, the employee must specifically reference the qualifying reason for leave. She never did that. She knew how to do that, and she never did that. Not only did she not do it at the time, even though she had FMLA time available to her, she was given an opportunity after the fact to have a meeting with HR and her manager and explain what happened. And in that meeting, we have affidavits that we have submitted. She never said, oh, if I knew my PTO time wasn't approved, I would have asked for FMLA. That was never said in that meeting, and we submitted affidavits to that effect. And we can certainly, if the commission would like, provide further testimony on that. What she said at that time was, I thought I could just get PTO approved, and the system showed pending, so I thought I was okay. The system never showed approved, and it was against company policy to request same-day PTO, so she knew that PTO time wouldn't be approved. They gave her numerous opportunities in that meeting to explain why she was late, and all she said was, I thought I could take PTO. Even when they explained to her and reminded her that the rules were that you can't take same-day PTO, and you certainly can't take it hours after your shift starts, she still didn't say, well, I was sick, I was ill. I'm not saying she needed magic words of PTO or excuse me, of FMLA, even though the regulations required her to. But they gave her that opportunity, and she never said in that meeting, it is uncontroverted, oh, if I knew my PTO would be denied, I would have asked for FMLA. She just said, I wanted to use my PTO. So at that point, how was the company to know that that tardiness was in any way related to a disability when she was saying, I strictly wanted vacation this morning? Again, we had a very generous notice requirement. FMLA allows a company to apply a notice requirement for employees when they're taking FMLA. She had a very long amount of time to pull that trigger, if you will, and ask for FMLA, and she didn't. Another fatal flaw in this self-help argument is her medical notes, and we don't deny we received medical notes. The medical notes were for breaks during the workday so that she could walk away from her desk and use the restroom. She never asked for an accommodation to be late to work. Even though she was on a performance improvement plan for being late to work, and she had every opportunity to say that, she never asked for an accommodation to be late for work. So how is it self-help for her to be late for work when she not only has FMLA time available, but that was never an accommodation that she asked for the company to give her? And again, it's very important to note, this allegedly great performer was on a PIP, or a performance improvement plan, for being late, among other things, when she showed up late for work 2 days in 1 week and never alleged or asked for FMLA. So again, I reiterate that termination was based on legitimate non-discriminatory reasons. The investigator gave her every opportunity to show that it was not based on those reasons, and in fact, to show some kind of a bias or some kind of animus. And what she came up with really was conjecture and speculation, and that was all considered and dismissed. Her claims really were, well, Unum probably did this, or Unum probably did that. She cited to emails, which was cited to again today, that show that there was some kind of a bias. When the investigator point blank asked, how do these emails show bias? I've looked at them, I don't see it. The response was, they speak for themselves. That was the response, and that is in the written record. The investigator considered those emails and came to the conclusion, and again I quote, these emails provide no direct or indirect evidence that HR was annoyed by complainants' breaks. They do not evidence anything to that extent. The other argument of supposed malice or bias is the allegation that, well, one of the documents had some redactions in it. So that must show that there.
Ms. McCann, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's 10 minutes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So I will, thank you, because time goes by really fast. So I will say again that, legitimate non-discriminatory reasons for termination. I'm happy to answer any questions about accommodations, but all accommodations were given in this case, and the termination was based on violation of the company policy.
Questions for Ms. McCann? Commissioner Whitworth.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ashby?
No questions, thank you very much.
Commissioner David?
No, all set, thank you.
Commissioner Duson?
I'm all set as well, thank you.
Thank you. So back to Ms. Tozier, you have just about 2.5 minutes remaining. But you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So first I'll say that there's a dispute here that a jury would need to decide about what was said in that last meeting on January 23rd about FMLA, because even though Ms. McCann is saying that she has affidavits from Unum saying that she didn't talk about FMLA and how she would have gotten that time covered, we have a different story coming from the complainant. So this is a disagreement here between the two sides about what was said. She had FMLA leave left. She had until 5 p.m. I did not fail to mention that that was the procedure that she knew that she could call out up to 5 p.m. the next day. She didn't do that because in her mind, she thought that she could get it covered under PTO, and she was trying to save her FMLA. Again, if she understood that she didn't get that approved, she would have used the FMLA leave. So even if her accommodation request had nothing to do with being late to work, if she had an episode at the beginning of the day, she still had FMLA leave left that she could have used to cover that beginning part of the day. It wasn't hours later. It was 10:45 a.m. that she made the request in the system. This is all documented. And she was trying to get from 10 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. covered. Now, the argument about the reasonable accommodations being time barred, a jury can make inferences, and the fact that we're saying the termination was unlawful because it's related to the accommodations that weren't given, and it's related to the context around what happened that day. Now, she also spoke about the emails and saying there's no evidence in emails that there was any malintent going on. Well, on November 6th, we have an email from complainant supervisor where he says to HR, "You're telling me that I have to coach her through her use of her accommodations? Is that right?" And then on November 26th, there's another email where the internal managers are talking about her FMLA use as being excessive. So a jury could certainly look at this internal email correspondence and think that there was discriminatory animus there. It links to why she was fired on January 23rd. So her accommodations and why she didn't get that is completely relevant to why she was fired on January 23rd. She was told just weeks prior, and it's all written by UNUM, that her metrics had never been higher, that she had done a wonderful job. So I think that, and so it wasn't just that she was slightly better, it was that she had done the best in her metrics that she had ever done before. And this was just right prior to her being terminated.
That's your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions for Ms. Tozier? Commissioner Whitworth?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Ashby?
No, thank you.
Commissioner David?
No.
Commissioner Dusan? Okay, thank you. So at this point, we will turn to the investigator, Mr. Gitchos.
Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Milo Gitchos. I'm the investigator that was assigned to this case. I think both complainants counsel and respondents counsel have done an excellent job illustrating the facts. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Questions for the investigator, Commissioner Whitworth?
No, I don't have any questions, thanks.
Commissioner Ashby?
No, thank you.
Commissioner David?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Dusan? Okay, thank you, Milo. That may be the fastest presentation ever. So then we would turn to commissioners to make a motion or motions.
I'll move to take them together and move that we find that there's no reasonable grounds that UNUM discriminated against complainant based on disability, and no reasonable grounds to believe that defendant retaliated, and that the complaint should be dismissed.
Second. Is there any discussion?
I'll just say in support of the motion that it seems clear to me that the performance issues remain with or without the accommodation and justify the termination.
Any additional discussion?
So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4. All 4 commissioners voted in favor of the no reasonable grounds motion on both counts, both claims. So the findings are both no reasonable grounds, and the commission will send counsel and the parties a letter describing the vote and the next steps under the Maine Human Rights Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amy, are we still on track with the agenda as it's written? Okay.
We are actually, and at this point, I'm going to call Mr. Sastamoinen. He's going to be participating by phone, and I offered, as opposed to him sitting on the phone the whole time, for us to give him a call. So let me just remember how to do that. Hold on. Mr. Don Sastamoinen. Hold on. This is like extending my skills to their max. I'm calling him. I think I'm calling him.
So Amy, when you do that, you have to do it with a particular Zoom number to get them in this meeting. I need to learn that skill myself.
Under participants, it has a, oh, call accepted. Mr. Sastamoinen, are you on the line? Mr. Sastamoinen? Ah, there he is in the waiting room. Yeah, so you can do it under participants. If you click on the little caret up by participants, it gives you an invite option. Mr. Sastamoinen, are you on the line? You're muted right now. I don't know if you know how to unmute. I don't know how to ask you to unmute. Oh, okay, Mr. Sastamoinen.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, excellent, thank you. All right, so before you start, I just want to tell you that we have right now on the Zoom, the video meeting, we have our four of our five commissioners are here, and a bunch of lawyers for other cases and some investigators. And also we have on the line Nicole Lorenzotti, who is the lawyer for Maine Behavioral Health Care. So just so you know, as you and I discussed the other day, you're going to start. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation. And I will ask that you not use the names, and I mentioned this the other day, the names of any third parties, because we gave them pseudonyms in our report. We're required to keep the names of witnesses confidential. So after you use your 10 minutes, then Ms. Lorenzotti has a chance to speak. And if you don't use all your 10 minutes, then we can come back to you and you can respond. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so your time starts now.
Again, good morning. I'm Don Sastamoinen. I have the LCPC license and was in the crisis job for 20 plus years. Had much prior clinical and counseling experience. When I got this report, the investigator's report, I was appalled. It contained many inaccuracies. It was incomplete in a number of areas, especially in regard to points that I had presented. It presented MBH's points pretty well, and I also detected some bias on the part of the investigator, so I was appalled. The first section that I'll talk about is the retaliation claim. This is the most important one, and it is replete with errors in that investigative report that you have in front of you. So all I can do is just beg you to, I can't possibly represent my whole case, but I hope to present some areas in each of the sections that will entice you to look at the material that I presented, because that certainly is not well represented. Telecrisis, just a little bit of history. In the winter of 2018 and 2019, we were under some pressure on the crisis team to start using telecrisis. Maine Behavioral Health had expanded their hospitals that they're affiliated with, and they had to provide crisis assessments in the emergency room. But at the same time, they had cut back on the number of crisis workers, and in some cases had actually eliminated shifts in areas that they had previously covered. So we were under some pressure. We had a staff meeting in the winter, and we were told that we should start using telecrisis. I had already done a little bit of digging on it, and I was quite upset by it. I didn't think we should be. It seemed to be not appropriate for the crisis setting. I then did some research, and I contacted the American Counseling Association, the National Association of Social Workers, I called the ACA hotline, ethics hotline. I looked at both of their ethical standards, and I wrote a 3-page report, which I please encourage you to look at. I presented it. I can't possibly do it here, but I went paragraph by paragraph looking at the ethical standards in regard to telecrisis. I also sent a letter to Shelley Pingree, our representative, because she had expressed in the newspaper an interest in pursuing telehealth. I pointed out to her there's a difference between telecrisis and telehealth, and I asked her to please consider my the information I found from the national associations that said it was unethical to use this and possibly harmful to use this. So anyway, once I started raising these issues, I began to get retaliation. And again, my memos, my submissions contain this better. But one of the key areas where they started asking me to retype 14-page assessments that I had submitted. Your investigative report said that I had previously been told to retype these assessments, and I had, quote, begrudgingly done that. That is completely inaccurate. I had never been asked to retype a 14-page assessment until I raised the issue regarding telecrisis. May Behavioral Health also said, since I had often brought up ethical issues in staff meetings, and I considered it my duty, I was trained in graduate school that if we see something unethical, we should discuss it. So MBH said that since I had brought up ethical issues in the past and hadn't been retaliated against, MBH didn't retaliate this time. Well, I contend that this is a much bigger issue. They had committed themselves to telecrisis because they had to cover all these emergency rooms, and by me raising these issues, they were much more upset than anything else I had said. With regard to the anti-male atmosphere that we worked under, first of all, an error in the investigative report or on the part of MBNH or a combination of the two, whenever I mention the anti-male or anti-age discrimination, they brought up the statistics and said that there were males hired elsewhere and that also, there were older workers. Unfortunately, the statistics that Maine Behavioral Health keeps presenting, and as did your investigator, applied to the statewide program. They did not apply to Rockland. In Rockland, when I left, we only had one male left, and he had exceptionally good typing skills, so he was able to survive. In the 20 years that I was there, we had a number of different supervisors of the program, and only one of them was male. Whenever the last several years, whenever there was an opening, they tended to hire young females who could type very, very fast, but had absolutely no clinical training or experience. There was a cartoon that was sent around to all crisis workers on the email, and it showed a male with his genitals exposed and a dog baring his teeth ready to bite his scrotum. One of the females had a screensaver with a half-naked male. And I ask you, how, other than an anti-male environment, could such things exist? If I sent around a cartoon of a female about to be raped or had a screensaver with a bikini-clad lady, I don't think that would work out too well. With regard to the aging discrimination or anti-aging atmosphere in Rockland, again, I point out they submit these statistics, but they're statewide. They don't apply to the Rockland team. For some reason or other, the Rockland team was anti-male and anti-aging worker. This is particularly important in regard to training on the computer. Young people are exposed now, apparently in elementary school, with typing and word processing and using the computer. I am an older worker. I had never had one class in typing or word processing. So they refused to, they sent me to all these trainings and I was lost in the first 5 minutes. And I would tell my supervisor, said, I was completely lost, I didn't get it. You've got to provide training that I can understand because of my age. And all she could do was say, well, do the best you can. So I did the best I could, and I survived, kept my head above water until I raised this telecrisis issue. And suddenly they come down on me about that. Kept riding me because I couldn't type and word processing, and it hadn't been that big an issue before. Okay, I'd like to stop there, and any time that's left, I will counter anything MVH has to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sastamoy. And just so you know, it's about 2.25 minutes left after we hear from MBH. But before we go to them, I'm going to see if the commissioners have any questions for you. So hold on. Commissioner Whitworth, questions at this point?
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Ashby?
None. Thank you very much.
Commissioner David? Okay. Commissioner Dusan?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Sastamoy, we will come back to you after we hear from Ms. Lorenzati on behalf of MBH. Ms. Lorenzati, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicole Lorenzati here on behalf of Maine Behavioral Healthcare. Thank you very much. I'll start by just saying I think Investigator Crossman's report was very appropriate, and they synthesized through the information quite accurately. They had a lot of information to work through. Many submissions by Mr. Sastamonian presented, but the facts of this matter are really straightforward. He worked for Maine Behavioral Healthcare for over 20 years. The facts of the matter show that he was a crisis response worker. The elements to get back to are what were the responsibilities of his job. As a crisis response worker, he was responsible for communicating with crisis response clients who needed to communicate with him and then get triaged for further outpatient services and care and treatment. In his role, he was responsible for communicating with these clients and working within appropriate records to dictate what they needed, his communications with these clients, and then getting them over to appropriate providers. He needed to, at first in his earlier years, type up his notes. And then as we come forth with coming into the 2020s in time, we come into electronic ages, right? So in the healthcare field, as times come forward, we work in EMR systems. So as the times come forward, as healthcare and other workplaces move forward with the times, so to speak, times change and workplaces change and electronic databases change and EMR systems change. Over time, Mr. Sastamonian had struggles with keeping up with those times, but his struggles with word processing, his struggles with typings, his struggles with electronic databases were never unknown to Maine Behavioral Healthcare or to Mr. Sastamonian. He always had those struggles. They were always documented, and it's in the record, as pointed out by Investigator Crossman. They've always been part of his history with Maine Behavioral Healthcare. They've always been documented in his performance evaluations. They've always been part. They are not simpatico with his age. So that's replete throughout his record. He's always struggled. But as the times have changed, as Maine Behavioral Healthcare progressed with EMRs, obviously the difficulties translate to different struggles with EMR systems. Over time, what did change was his frustration level and his attitude with moving forward with the times, for lack of a better way of putting that. And his vocality with his frustrations also changed, and his attitude did change. And the way in which he vocalized those frustrations changed. And so management needed to work with that. And the way they did try to work with that was also portrayed in his performance evaluations, where they would address that from time to time. And then in his 2 corrective actions that he had over the course of his time. One was in 2016 and one was in 2019. The one in 2016 was when, in connection with trying to work with him in training and his frustrations over the use of, at that time, some component of a word processing. He was very frustrated with an IT person and very, very inappropriate. And so he was written up. That is pointed out in the record. The relevance of that is to his retaliation claim. His retaliation claim is premised on his 2019 corrective action form. He received a corrective action in August of 2019, solely related because he typed up a note in relationship to a patient crisis call that came in, which was entirely illegible. That was not uncommon for Mr. Sastamonian. He had had years and years, sometimes, of unintelligible notes that he had been asked for years and years to retype. That is not uncommon for him to, I think he has acknowledged in his record that was not uncommon for him. If you look, I believe I submitted it as part of the record in connection with his August 2019 corrective action form. I submitted the 2 pages relevant to that. There's a completely unintelligible sentence as part of a patient crisis note that he was asked to retype. These are patients in crisis that call in that need help. It is super important, as you can understand, for the providers that treat these patients in crisis to understand what is going on and what they need. His notes need to be able to be read. He was asked to please retype it. He blatantly refused. This was following a pattern of insubordination and difficulty, and that is why he was written up. That is the only adverse action that is part of his record. That is the only basis for his retaliation claim. In their investigation report, Investigator Crossman pointed out that there was no sufficient basis for that to be deemed a sufficient adverse action to satisfy a retaliation claim, and respondent agrees with that. It's insufficient for a retaliation claim, both because it is an insufficient adverse action, and also because he has not come forward with any other evidence other than that one corrective action to support a retaliation claim. There's nothing. He just simply was unable to satisfy that part of his job. He was insubordinate and he was frustrated. There's nothing else. He was not fired. He was not terminated. He was frustrated. He was insubordinate. He received a corrective action. He did not get in trouble for raising an ethical concern. He had been a proud raiser of concerns of ethics for years. That is also replete throughout his performance evaluations, and he was commended for it. He raised a concern with use of telecrisis. They looked into it. They deemed it unfounded. It's okay if he held a different belief. Telecrisis is used all the time. It's used all the time now, thankfully, in this time of COVID-19. We need it. He may disagree. That's okay. They were fine with that. He was not fired. He resigned. He was frustrated after August. He was frustrated in September. He met with his leaders in September 4th. He had another awful interaction with his leaders on September 4th, where he was extremely, again, frustrated and disruptive. I commented on that in my position statement, where he was unacceptably rude again in that meeting, where he referenced Nazis and treatment of Nazis. Let me deflect again to his sex and age-based claim, since that's relevant. His age-based claim is based on no evidence. There are 6 other men. There of 14 positions of crisis response workers in Maine behavioral health care, 7 of them are men. 7 are women, 7 are men in the exact same position. There's no basis for his sex-based claim. His only evidence for that is that his claim is women have more nimble fingers and can type better than men. That's a stereotype and it's sexist. The only sexism brought to this claim is based on Mr. Sastamonian's stereotypes himself. The only premise for his age is that he claims he was treated differently based on his age. But again, that's only based on his claim that he can't comprehend EMRs because of his age. But again, if you look at his record, he struggled with word processing since the day he joined. And he has submitted evidence to Investigator Crossman saying that from the day of his back in his military training, they told him not to select a job where it would require word processing skills. It has nothing to do with his age. And to suggest that an organization should give age-based training would cause an employer to get in big trouble. For us to give training based on age would walk us into an age-based claim. So I would suggest that that is just a problem in and of itself. So with that said, I'll just stop at this point. I agree, obviously, that Investigator Crossman's report is entirely appropriate. There's no reasonable grounds for this case. And I think they've done a very good job at wading through all the paperwork that's been submitted by Mr. Sastamonian. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenzati. Questions for Ms. Lorenzati, Commissioner Whitworth,
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Ashby,
No, thank you very much.
Commissioner David?
I'm a little intrigued by the fact that he says that he didn't understand the training the first time. Did they have some obligation to give him some remedial help in the training, or did they tell him that that was his problem? He needed to go take a course in word processing, or how did they handle that?
From my understanding and from the submissions that we've presented, they provided multiple trainings to him, multiple trainings, including individual trainings. So several opportunities at new trainings, not just a one-off.
Including, you just said, including individual
Multiple.
Remedial attention.
Multiple trainings, and then that led to the one
right
episode where he insisted on one specific trainer and said that if they didn't give him that one specific trainer, that is the one blow up he had on September 4th, where he likened it to Nazi camp.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Dusson, questions? Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lorenzati, you'll have a little over a minute left after we hear from Mr. Sastamonian again. Mr. Sastamonian, you have a little over 2 minutes. If you want to use them, you don't have to.
Okay. First of all, I'm not surprised that Ms. Lorenzati thinks that the report is appropriate, because it presents her case very nicely. Again, she's presented two or three things that are completely wrong. First of all, she said before we went to the electronic records, we typed up our assessments. That's incorrect. We did them handwritten. And she said that we accepted calls for clients. That's not true. We lost the contract to Switzer. So we only worked in the emergency room. So again, all of these areas. In regard to the fire-in versus resignation, we had the meeting on Wednesday. I worked my 10-hour shift on Saturday and Sunday, and I decided that for my health, I had to get out of there. I just couldn't take the pressure anymore. So I did send my resignation, but the supervisor from South Portland, or Portland area, called up on Monday and told me he was going to fire me and gave me 2 weeks severance pay. So again, she's wrong there. Again, it's true that I have had a problem with typing in word processing my full 20 years there, but I did the best I could and I was able to survive, and it only became a problem when I raised this issue regarding the telecrisis. I don't know what she's talking about. We weren't supposed to bring up new things in this session. It was my understanding. She talked something about my military training, and I don't know what she's talking about there. She's pulled that out of the air for some reason. The 2016 incident report is a good example, because I hadn't received proper training. By the way, we only got one training on each system we went to. No, we didn't get several trainings. We got one training. If you're lost from the first 5 minutes, that's too bad, they told me. Just do the best you can. In that 2016 incident, I called the helpline because I was completely lost. I kept losing. This is when we first started on this new system. And I admit I let a swear word out or two. And I wasn't swearing at the lady on the helpline. She was very nice, but I did swear. So I get a 10-page oral reprimand. My supervisor, at another point, who's a female, sat down next to me and tried to show me something on the computer. When the computer wouldn't do what she wanted, she kept repeating the F phrase, kept saying, F me, F me, F me.
Mr. Sastamonian, I'm sorry, really sorry to interrupt you, but that's your time. So I think we're going to have to hold it there, and I'm very sorry to cut you off mid-sentence. I hate doing that, but if I could ask our commissioners if they have any follow-up questions for you. Commissioner Whitworth?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Ashby?
No, thank you.
Commissioner David? No, okay. Commissioner Dusson?
No, thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Sastmoinen, again, sorry to cut you off mid-sentence. I'm going to mute you because at this point, your opportunity to speak is done. Okay?
So should I hang up?
Nope, don't hang up. You're going to want to listen because Ms. Lorenzati has another minute, and then we'll go to the investigator, and then the commissioners will vote on the case, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Lorenzati, you have, my lights keep going off. You have about a minute.
I think unless the commissioners have any further questions for me, I don't need to take any more of your time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Lorenzati? I see Commissioner Whitworth shaking her head, Commissioner Ashby, Commissioner David, any questions? Nope. Commissioner Doosan? Nope. Okay, great. Then I'm going to mute you as well. And then, oh, you muted yourself. Investigator Thompson Crossman.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm working with a few different devices here. So I don't have much to add. I will say it seems, so a couple of the things that Mr. Sastmoinen mentioned that were in the report were me summarizing respondents' position. They were not the facts that I found. So the thing about him grudgingly filling stuff out, that was in respondent submissions. That was not a finding that I made. I will just say that it's pretty clear from the record that Mr. Sastmoinen had difficulty with the EMRs, the electronic medical records, for several years. They're in his performance reviews for a while, certainly prior to 2019. He did certainly raise an ethical concern that would be protected by the WPA, but I did not find that the write-up that he got was in retaliation for making that report. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Kit. Commissioner Whitworth, questions for the investigator?
No questions. Thank you, Kit.
Commissioner Ashby?
No, thank you.
Commissioner David?
Kit, how do you determine whether or not it's in retaliation for the complaint? Do you look to the text of the response and look for any clues there that it's referring to that? And there are none. Is that what you found?
So what I looked at was the history of Mr. Sastmoinen's trouble with the electronic medical records, the fact that he had also a history of raising ethical concerns and had never been disciplined for that before, that he had the write-up he had received once before in 2016 was for problems with the electronic medical records. And so it just didn't seem that the one write-up that he got, again, for problems with the electronic medical records had anything to do with the ethical concerns that he was raising in June about
right.
the
So it's the absence of any reference that makes that connection. And he's been doing it for a long time. Yeah. Okay.
I didn't find a nexus, basically, between his protected report and the write-up that he got in August.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kit. Wait, did I ask Commissioner Doosan? I think I did. You didn't have any questions. Okay, thank you, Kit. So at this point, we would be looking for a motion or motions.
I'll move that we accept the findings of the investigator that there are no reasonable grounds to believe that respondent discriminated against a complainant on the basis of age or sex, and that there are no reasonable grounds to believe respondent retaliated against complainant for engaging in WPA protected activity, and that the complaint should be dismissed in accordance with the act.
I'll second.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. So the motion is to find no reasonable grounds on both claims. All those commissioners in favor, please raise your hand and say yes.
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 2, 3, 4. The vote is 4-0 in favor of a finding that there are no reasonable grounds to believe that unlawful discrimination or retaliation took place. The commission will send a letter to both parties and council to let them know of the vote and the next steps available under the Maine Human Rights Act. Thank you. And Mr. Sastmoinen, you're welcome to stay on the line or hang up to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next case, okay, Mr. Fredette, I know Mr. Fredette messaged me. You have another meeting at 10:30. Hopefully we can get this done before then.
Yeah, I think that's fine, and I appreciate. Just want to give everyone a heads up.
Go ahead, Deb.
Okay, so the next case is H20-0524AB. It's a reasonable grounds case. So we would like to hear from the respondent first. Is there anybody here for Mr. Auger and Ms. Kane?
And actually, just to be clear, there is a no reasonable grounds recommended finding against Ms. Kane, and there's no submission about that. So the only respondent we would hear from is Mr. Auger.
Mr. Auger, thank you.
I believe Mr. Fredette is here for Mr. Auger.
I am, and he's present as well.
I am here also.
So you have 10 minutes. You can, Mr. Fredette, Mr. Auger, you can choose who's presenting what, but you have a total of 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning, commissioners. And thank you for your service to the state, serving on the commission. I will be brief. Mr. Auger also wants to have a moment to have a couple of words. I do want to just point out in the investigator's report on page 3 of the report, in footnote 6, it does specifically highlight that the complainant's alleged race discrimination alleged it, but did not provide any evidence other than the facts of the race to support this claim. Accordingly, their race claim fails and are not analyzed herein. And so to that extent, I'm not going to address that in much detail in my response. That would then lead us to the finding of the reasonable grounds that Mr. Auger did discriminate based on familial status. And if you read the report, obviously that allegation is based upon the fact that Mr. Auger did submit a application for tenancy to the complainant. And on that form, it did have a space on there that did in fact indicate a request that date of birth be filled in. I think what's important in regards to this issue would be the fact that Mr. Auger had in fact in February of 2020 gone to the apartment building. He was looking to purchase it at that time. He went there with his contractor to look at the different apartments at that time. He went through each of the apartments. I believe he met with the complainant at that point in time. And in fact, while he was there, met and saw the children. In March of 2020, he did in fact purchase the building. And then shortly thereafter, went to each of the apartments to install smoke detector batteries, carbon detector batteries, making sure all those issues were properly addressed and working correctly for the safety of the tenants. And it's my understanding as well, at that point in time, he also had the opportunity to meet the complainant, and the minor children were home. At the same time, shortly thereafter, in March 2020, just to make sure he had contact information for each of the tenants, he did supply a application to each of the tenants asking for contact information, email addresses, and whatnot, so that he had that information on file. Again, I think he would admit that the application did have space on there for a question regarding tenants and their ages. And from his perspective, it was important to him as someone who owns a number of units, concerned that if there were, for example, a fire in the building and the fire department was looking for who might be in the building, important to him that he know that who was in there, and he could inform police or rescue folks about who would actually be in the building. And I think that's sort of, it really gets to the point of why he has done that. I think he's going to address the fact that he has other units. It has children in these other units. He did have work done on the apartment in the later fall of 2020, which was about $23,000 worth of work. And in order to have that work done, he did evict the complainants and then did re-rent the property. Tom, I think if you want to pick up from there, does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Good morning, members of the Maine Human Rights Commission. My name is Tom Auger, and I work as a contractor at Maine Revenue. My wife, Joan, who is Native American and grew up on Indian Island in Old Town, is an employee of the Maine State Lottery. First, I'd like to give you some background. I purchased my first apartment building, a 3-unit, 18 years ago on Union Street in South Portland. And my wife and I purchased our second building 3 years ago on Go Street in Biddeford. Then this last building 14 months ago on Elm Street in Biddeford. It is the Elm Street building that is the focus of this meeting. I was afforded the opportunity to view the Elm Street property the day before the main showing, and I went through all 4 units with a realtor in the contract I had used for work I had done on the Go Street property. I asked the contractor to come because I needed to determine what work needed to be done and to get cost estimates to determine if the purchase made sense, given the $415,000 price tag. The tenants in all 4 units were home when I did my walkthrough. I was told by the realtor that 3 of the units were Section 8 and all 4 were substantially under market rents. The 8 units on the first floor were in good shape, just needing a little bit of paint. The 3rd floor unit needed a new kitchen floor. The 2nd floor unit, the unit that Johnsons lived in, was in terrible shape and needed major work. After viewing the 3rd floor unit, it was obvious that the 1st and 3rd floor units had been rehabbed at some point in the past, but the 2nd floor had not. My contractor estimated $20,000 to $30,000 to bring the 2nd floor back, which included building a wall halfway down the living room, turning it into a 3-bedroom, as had been done previously on the other 2 floors. I spent approximately $24,000 getting it rehabbed on top of the labor that my wife and I put in, which consisted of 4 long weekends and several Fridays when we get the time off. So upon purchase of the Elm Street property, it was clear that I was going to have to spend a bit of money to get the units to where they needed to be, and that I was going to have to increase the rent substantially. One of the first floor units that is Section 8 is $100 below what Section 8 currently pays for a 1-bedroom. The other first floor unit is $475 below what Section 8 pays for a 2-bedroom. The Johnson's unit was not Section 8, but their unit was $500 below what Section 8 pays. And the 3rd floor is also a Section 8 unit, and that's $500 below what Section 8 pays. At present, I'm just waiting for my contractor to give me a time frame to have the additional work done, and we'll adjust all the rents accordingly. Our tenant mix in all 3 buildings is as follows. Union Street, the one I purchased 18 years ago, is a 3-unit and has a single mother with 2 minor children on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor is a couple with 3 young children, and the 3rd floor is 2 brothers. Go Street is a 3-unit with a couple and the guy's mother who is in a wheelchair on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor is a couple with 1 minor child, and the 3rd floor is a single mother with 3 minor children. Our 2nd floor tenants on Union Street are a Black family, and the 1st and 2nd floor tenants on Go Street are mixed race families. When we purchased the Elm Street property, the tenant mix was a single woman in each of the 1st floor units, the Johnsons on the 2nd floor, and a couple with an adult son on the 3rd floor. Now, I've learned during the process that we're not allowed to ask for the age of the children on our units, and most assuredly we'll cross that out of our applications going forward. But I will say that whether a family is of a different race or than either myself or my wife, or if the family has minor children, we've never ever, that's never entered into our decision on who to rent to. In fact, we've never discriminated against anyone based on anything. Since Mr. Johnson was home with the children when I initially viewed the property, I knew they had minor children. Right after the purchase, I checked and replaced the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors as necessary in all units. Again, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, and the children are home. And it was at that time that I handed out the rental applications. So filling out the application, which I had all the existing tenants do, did not tell me anything regarding the children that I didn't already know, except for their exact ages. I've always viewed that as a safety issue, in that if, heaven forbid, there's ever a fire or an emergency, I'm going to be one of the first calls made by the authorities. And if the parents are not home or are incapacitated, I'd certainly want to be able to be in a position to tell the authorities who is living in the unit along with the ages. My contractor didn't tell me until, so I bought it in February. My contractor didn't tell me until early August that it could fit me in starting the 1st of November. So I gave the Johnson notice on August 15th, giving them 2.5 months notice. They moved out a month and a half later in early October, which I didn't find out until I received notice from CMP that the electric had reverted back to my name. I'll admit I'm being quite bewildered at being called a racist and discriminate against families. As you can see from my tenant mix, race has never entered into who we rent to, nor have families with children ever been a determining factor in who we rent to. My wife and I are wholeheartedly against discrimination in any form. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fredette and Mr. Auger. Just FYI, when we get back to you, you will collectively have a little over a minute left. But first, I'm going to see if the commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Whitworth, questions for respondent. You look like you're thinking about it, but now maybe you're frozen, unclear. I will come back to you. Okay, Commissioner Ashby, questions for respondent?
I don't think so at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Whitworth, now you're moving again. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, my screen froze. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner David?
No.
Commissioner Dusan?
No,
Well,
not at this time.
I think I do have a question, Amy.
Okay. Is it for Mr. Fredette or Mr. Auger?
For Attorney Fredette first, do you concede that that application is illegal to ask for the ages, that violates the familial status prohibition?
Good morning, Ed. What I would indicate and what I would refer you to is actually page 3 of the investigator's report, that in the paragraph cited unlawful inquiry, that it does indicate there that it would be illegal. However, it does also indicate that, if I'm going to quote it from the report, it says, while requesting birth dates may in some instances be permissible for legitimate business purposes. So I think there that even there, the investigator would suggest that there are times when it would be legitimate. And obviously, I think Mr. Auger, in his responses, is repeatedly, and I think even in his action of going in and replacing the batteries for the smoke detectors and the carbon detectors, he's concerned about the safety of his tenants. And, you know, I think the fact that he was concerned about the event of if there was a fire, including he did, and I think also respond that he put a new safety doors on there, that it's a legit purpose for asking the question.
And for Mr. Auger, you had the contractor with you when you inspected the building prior to making your offer and completing the purchase, correct?
Yes, I did.
And was he identified as a contractor to the tenants as you visited and looked around?
I believe he was, yes.
Right. And you say that the contractor told you at that time that his schedule was that he couldn't do the work until November, and you're looking to buy the place in April, right?
It was February that I purchased it.
February.
Yeah, I knew I had to have the work done. He just didn't know when he was going to be able to get to it because he's so busy.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you to Mr. Fredette and Mr. Auger. I'm going to mute you both for now, and we're going to turn to Ms. Ender on behalf of complainant.
Yeah, I thought that Ms. Dusan had a question earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. No?
Okay.
I'm all
Thank
good.
you very much,
My question might be
commissioners
related.
and staff of the commission. I appreciate your consideration and your attention. On the unlawful inquiry issue, the commission had a rule prohibiting unlawful inquiries, prohibiting inquiries around race, familial status, marital status, et cetera, for a long time. The Human Rights Act was amended in 1989 to become substantially equivalent to the Fair Housing Act, which extended that protection to families with minor children. And so in 2011, so that the rule was or the practice was in effect for quite a long time, and it was enacted into law in 2011 about illegal inquiries. So for many years, the commission has refused to excuse noncompliance with this provision. Many landlords have used the excuse that they are seeking to protect the children by making these inquiries that are illegal. The exception to the inquiry is when there are adults who are going to be responsible for the lease. They can be asked about their credit history and their criminal background history, et cetera. But it is goes beyond those needs to apply to allow noncompliance with illegal inquiries for the families. Respondent was clearly ignorant of the law, and his failure to take it seriously cannot be excused or ignored. He complicates his proven violation of the law by saying there's no proof that Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were treated differently than other tenants. The investigator found it more likely than not that Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were targeted for the illegal inquiry. Respondent made this harder because he didn't cooperate very well with the investigation. There was an issues and resolution conference set up. He did not show up. That necessitated Mr. Gichos's having to hold an individual interview with Mr. Ogier. Respondent provided Ms. Johnson's application, but not Mr. Johnson's. He had records. He did not produce any records himself of whom he asked for whom he asked for applications. So he just said he couldn't remember. And he didn't produce any records. So this was a very important, in the face of being charged with an illegal inquiry and the investigator putting him on notice of that, he didn't provide any applications or any proof or any verification that he hadn't taken any other applications. And again, the safety issue is a red herring. It is all landlords want to have, all good landlords, and Mr. Ogier may be a good landlord, want their tenants to be protected. Maine has an enormous number of fires related both in the wintertime and at other times of the year. There are electrical fires. It's a huge issue in Maine. And so taking appropriate action to prevent fires is important. That does not mean that you can ask what children live there. The children's lives are just as important as others, but the fire safety measures are what address this, not asking illegal questions. In terms of making housing unavailable, Respondent alleges he has all tenants fill out standard rental applications, even though these applications have illegal questions. But he told the investigator he couldn't remember if he had all the tenants fill out the application. There are only 4 households there. There's only 4 households. So Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Johnson had to fill out their application, and Mr. Ogier couldn't remember if he had the other 3 tenants fill out applications or not. It's not unreasonable that Mr. Gichos found that it was more likely than not that the Johnsons were the only people that had to complete the application. In his submission, in his written objection to this case, respondent he resists both the legal standard and the facts. He resists the idea, he seeks to have direct evidence because that's more objective, but that's not how a prima facie case works. In a prima facie case, everybody is faced with the ambiguities of weighing what is more likely than not. So there's got to be, so respondent incorrectly insists that a prima facie case requires objective, tangible evidence. That's much closer to requiring direct evidence. It is not speculative that respondent in fact got rid of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson as tenants and replaced them with a childless couple, even while this case was pending and the issue of family status discrimination was confronting him. And nor is it speculative that respondent did not take landlord-tenant laws seriously. He entered without proper notice. Even when Mr. Johnson said, "Who are you?" and "My babies are sleeping," I'm trying to put them down for a nap. Respondent confused evidence by submitting photos of 2 different apartments. And he was unclear that he did not seem to understand that Mr. and Mrs. Johnson purchased their own major appliances. So he really muddled many parts of the facts. And then he resisted the analysis of a prima facie case. Ms. Johnson had asked about staying in the unit or returning during renovations, and respondent rebuffed her. He discouraged her by noting how much the current tenants were paying. This happens to be the same amount that Ms. Johnson and Mr. Johnson are paying in their current apartment, and where their utility bills are higher than in the former apartment. So they are paying more than what the respondent's current tenants are paying. He's told them they would have to pay a security deposit. They expected this. They had to pay a security deposit on their new unit. He insinuates that the Johnson's unit was in poor shape because of the behavior, but their apartment had not been renovated in the 4 years that they lived there, and it had not been renovated shortly before they moved in. Other units had been renovated. Complainants have always acknowledged that there were some complaints in mid-April, and that respondent issued a blanket text, and the Johnson family addressed the short noise issue. The parties separately assert that respondent did not contact Ms. Johnson or Mr. Johnson directly about the noise. There were blanket texts which they received, but there was nothing directed. There was no direct communication between the Johnsons and respondent. The noise stopped, as demonstrated by respondent's insistence that he be appropriately, but he insisted that he be told of complaints, and complaining tenants had not been shy about complaining, and there were no complaints after May 5th. The notice to quit was served well after the noise issues appeared to be resolved, and the allegations of noise, this was an extraordinary time, at the period of in April and early May, schools were closed. I mean, it had nothing to do with school vacation because schools were out of session. I mean, their children were not in school. Their normal routines were completely disrupted. And there was, and Ms. Johnson left her job at one point to go home to try to address the issue and see what was going on. And that, without speaking to respondent about this, it was during the time that we all had to adjust to the world shifting, where the kids had no play area to play outside. They were not in school. Their routines were completely disrupted. And then Mr. and Mrs. Johnson both tried to address it directly with the children.
Ms. Ender, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's actually your time.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to note the information about what complainants are paying for rent in their new apartment. I'm not sure that is in the record, so I would ask the commissioners to disregard that if it's not in the record.
I believe it is. I believe I made a point of submitting that in writing.
Okay, my mistake.
It's easy to make mistakes.
So questions for Ms. Ender from the commissioners. Commissioner Whitworth.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Ashby.
Just one, I think. One of the findings is that when the complainant did receive the notice to quit, they inquired about a new apartment, and the investigator found that the respondent said that there wouldn't be an apartment large enough available for the family. Was there otherwise an apartment, if the record says, was there otherwise an apartment available? Ms. Ender, can you hear me?
Oh, I didn't, okay. I don't know what, I mean, that question was directed to, had been directed to Mr. Ogier because he's the one that owns property. I have no idea if he had any other properties that were available, that were large enough for this family.
Well, I was just wondering if that was one of the bases for the complainant's complaint, is that the landlord was sort of substituting his judgment for theirs for what might be a large enough apartment. That could have been a basis for familial status discrimination. I was just curious as to whether that factually was present in this case.
I only know about the unit that the Johnsons were being required to vacate and how big that was. And they both felt that it would be perfectly adequate for them. As you know, this unit had been had a wall, a low wall that divided the two parts of it. And I believe that when it was renovated, the wall was raised, and that created a different configuration altogether. But that all happened after my clients were already moving out. And she, you know, Ms. Johnson was inquiring, could they stay? And also, was there any place else? And they were just discouraged from that. So I don't know what Mr. Ogier had available or what he could have had available.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner David, questions for Ms. Ender?
Attorney Ender, can you evict a tenant at will for no reason?
Depends on what, I mean, a tenant at will. Well, first of all, there was a CDC moratorium in effect and court changes in effect during this time related to COVID. So nobody was getting evicted during this time. As a practical matter, you know, the courts were not open. The whole process changed over. I don't do that kind of practice, so I don't know if they could have been evicted or not. In a regular world, there can be a 30-day notice to quit for no reason given.
How does he get to do the renovation while they're tenants? What does he have to do?
Well, he can do it in parts, or he could put them up somewhere else, or he could negotiate with them about how that could happen. He was not interested in negotiating with them.
You make a point of saying that the eviction comes after the noise complaints were resolved. Doesn't that indicate that it's not retaliatory because they're a family or because they're noisy? I mean, I'm concerned by the fact that he comes before he buys the building with a contractor and determines that this needs to be renovated and it can't be done until months later, and he gives them the months before he tells them that I need access to the apartment and I'm giving you a notice to quit.
Send the notice to quit. Well, they could have. He knows he's going to be selling the place. I mean, he knows he's going to be renovating the case way early on, like so in March. He doesn't share with them any of that until the end of August. So that's time that they could have spent organizing their lives and getting a place to go or figuring out what they're going to do. There was a certain he made things very, very hard for them, and he was very disrespectful for them throughout. So.
Okay, you're saying that giving them the notice in August, they leave voluntarily in October. It's not pursued, but that was not enough time for them?
It was really hard to find places in October. Again, the rent markets have gone sky high. I mean, there's been these huge changes in the rent. It was not easy at all to get to visit places. I mean, we have done in my office countless reasonable accommodation requests for people to be safe during COVID while they're moving into or out of apartments. These are not normal times, and the Johnsons had difficult and challenges that were COVID related because of this. It was not a regular normal situation.
I don't see any mention in the record about COVID concerns on either side. Did I miss something?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Commissioner Doosan, any questions for Ms. Ender?
Yes, just one question regarding the renovation, I believe. Is it in the record that the result of the renovation was intended to create an additional bedroom? I ask because that allows me to have a better understanding of the size of the apartment. In addition, not physical size, but an additional bedroom, which would, in that case, perhaps accommodate the larger family. Better.
So I'm having a terrible time hearing you.
Okay, sorry.
Your voice is very soft.
I just want to know if it was in the record. Mr. Auger mentioned that as a result of the renovations and the rehabilitation or addition of a wall, the unit had more bedrooms than it did before the renovations. Did I misunderstand that? The context for my question is to the issue of whether there was an apartment large enough available to the complainants. So I'm asking if that was in the record. It was something Mr. Auger stated during his presentation. I'm asking if it was in the record. Perhaps Ms. Ender is the wrong person to ask this question. Maybe the investigator would be the better person to respond.
There were floor plans, but I don't know it. But the renovation material came after this discrimination that we're alleging had already occurred.
Understood. The context of my question is the information provided related to the complainant's inquiry to the respondent regarding the availability, the opportunity to stay in the unit while renovations were worked out or move to another unit, to which I understood Mr. Auger's response was there was not a unit of appropriate size available to them. So never mind. It's just a matter that helps me understand the balance, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn back to respondents who have a minute, whether it's going to be Mr. Fredette or Mr. Auger, it's up to you. Oh, you're still muted, Mr. Fredette.
Hi. So I think what's important here to realize the fact is that Mr. Auger has been very clear that he had a contractor with him. He went into the facility with the contractor prior to even purchasing the building, and he was well aware that there were children in that apartment before he even purchased the property. He had gone in a second time. And so the fact that he asked for an application at a later date, which may have had information on the fact that there were children in the building, he already knew that. It's a matter of record. And in regards to evictions, I do evictions. I do a lot of them. There had been a change in the process of doing evictions. You needed to file an additional form with your complaint for an eviction. But evictions were in fact moving forward, maybe a little bit slower than normal. And you did have to provide a little bit more information, but there were evictions going on at the time. And again, when he even gave them notice, as Mr. Auger said, he gave them 2.5 months notice. It wasn't like, be out in 7 days. So it was very fast notice. Tom, do you want to add anything?
Actually, that was your time. So
Okay. Thank you.
I'm afraid we cannot have you add anything, Mr. Auger. But what we can do is ask the commissioners if they have any follow-up questions. Commissioner Whitworth.
Hey, Brian.
No questions.
Yeah, I don't know who's speaking on the other line, but it's breaking up terribly.
I think, Mr. Fredette, that is your other call. If you could mute, thank you. Commissioner Whitworth, any questions for? Okay, Commissioner Ashby.
I just want to follow up, Mr. Fredette. Do you dispute that it certainly appears that these are the only tenants for which your client requested this application? Certainly, at least as alleged in the investigator's report and by Ms. Ender, that your client could not come up with any information about whether he had made this request of other tenants, and there really are only a couple of other tenants, correct?
That is correct, and my understanding, and certainly in our response, he did indicate that he did ask the other tenants for them to complete the application as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner David, any questions for respondent?
Nothing further now.
Commissioner Doosan, any questions for respondent? No, okay. It's safe to mute yourself, Mr. Fredette. Thank you for juggling two calls at once. And now complainant used all their time, so now we'll turn to the investigator, to Mr. Gitchos.
Good morning again, commissioners. I'm Milo Gitchos. I'm the investigator that was assigned to this case. My findings were based on an analysis of a complete understanding and a taken in toto of the circumstances over the period that I looked at. Respondent purchased the property and very shortly after purchasing the property, reached out to all the tenants via text and email and sent them a direct deposit account. Pardon me. A direct deposit account number where rent could be forwarded. Shortly after that, complainants received or were requested to complete the application again, where they did list out, which requested that they list out the number of people living in the home and their ages. Shortly after that, prior to, respondent also sent out a text saying, if anybody has any complaints or concerns, feel free to text or call me at any time. Now, in the course of my investigation, I discovered that prior to purchasing the property, the previous landlord had also spoken to the other respondent named Ms. Kane previously about the children on the property, that she had complaints the kids would make noise, and he had told her that I cannot evict people because they have children. Living in an apartment that's part of living in an apartment building. And he then sold the property on. All this is to illustrate that Mr. Auger had knowledge of who was living in the building and how to contact them. The complaints that came in or that were received by I'm very sorry if it's Auger or Auger. I apologize for mispronouncing your name if I have. The complaints that came in, taken in total, are relatively standard noise complaints. And they're relatively sparse. They stretch over quite a period, which I thought was a bit of a stretch to say that people were adamantly complaining. Lastly, in respondent submissions, respondent stated that he provided enough notice to quit, but also was, essentially gathering evidence to be able to have justification to evict if need be. Now, taking everything as a whole and the period in which everything occurred, given our standard, our 50-50 standard, and lastly, that the complainants did request and ask if he had any other properties available, and respondent replied with stating, well, you would need to pay a security deposit, first month's rent or last month's rent, and we don't have anything available right now, or it's too small. Was made, so complainant did ask if there were other properties available, and that's what they were told. And then lastly, that the new tenants are a single couple without any children. So in light of everything in total, and given the standard by which we review cases, I found reasonable grounds to believe that the family was discriminated against because of their familial status. I'm sorry if that was a convoluted mess. I will accept any questions.
Thank you, Milo. Commissioner Whitworth, questions for the investigator?
No questions. Thanks, Milo.
Commissioner Ashby?
I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Commissioner David?
Mitch, you said that the noise complaints were sparse and spread out, and you considered them sort of the routine stuff that a landlord has to juggle between tenants. That suggests to me that that's not the motivation for eviction. You're concluding that the motivation for eviction was discriminatory animus against the family.
In the case, Mrs. Kane, there is evidence in the record, Commissioner David, to suggest that perhaps the complaints were being used to justify or be able to later evict or generate another reason to get rid of complainants from the property.
Well, I can't get by the fact that he shows up before he buys the property with a contractor to evaluate exactly what's necessary, and everybody's on notice that this apartment needs to be renovated, and it won't happen for a good number of months. And yet you conclude that that's a pretextual reason. I would agree with you if he evicts and then says that his reason is, oh, by the way, I need to do some work there. But that reason's been on the table since before he completed the purchase of the property. And if he didn't go through with the renovation, I would agree that we would look for whether there was some improper motive.
Understood. Yes, Commissioner David. And during the interview with respondent, I asked, why not put him on additional notice? Why not say, in March, this place is going to need some work and I don't plan on, and instead of, giving them additional time. And I thought that fitting in light of the pandemic situation. Because during that time, that's why I asked that question, because we were in this period and it would seem rather reasonable to say, okay, I've lawfully purchased this property. I'm the new owner and this place needs renovation. So,
but you don't mention that in the report. I mean, I might be in a different place if we were arguing about pandemic conditions, but we're just importing those in this argument here this morning for the first time. and sort
No,
of go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just illustrating my methods of my investigation.
Okay.
That did not make it into the report. That was simply an instruction of my methods of my questioning for the investigation.
Thank you.
Basically asking, why not give them more time? And complainant's response was, I gave them the notice that was legally required.
And you don't think they knew when he was there with the contractor that they were talking about renovating that apartment? That they were effectively on notice from the time that he bought it?
Essentially, no. When I spoke with complainants, he mentioned that they were going to do renovations, and it seemed like there had been reaching out, and there was some discussion between the parties of, well, what could be done. But as for an actual notice, as opposed to a constructed notice,
right? Right. It's constructed notice, and they don't resist. They don't resist the eviction. They don't play it out. They move in October.
Well, but it wasn't, and that's it. The eviction was secondary. It was a notice to quit. I mean, they were month-to-month renters, and he provided them. He responded, provided them the time necessary as per law to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dusan, questions for the investigator?
Yes, I just.
Could you speak up a teeny bit, Commissioner Dusan? You are soft-spoken.
Okay. Not according to my kids. No, just kidding. Yes, Mr. Gitchos, am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, Commissioner Dusan.
Thank you very much, sir. I just want to be sure, existence of the inquiry itself on the application is in itself a violation. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is also my understanding. I'm sure the ins and outs of it, I would have to defer to our astounding House
Corporation Counsel, that amazing Corporation Counsel. But it was your conclusion. Well, if that existence of the inquiry is itself a violation, then you mentioned in the report there is the opportunity for the respondent to provide a legitimate business purpose for the existence of that inquiry. And it was your conclusion after your investigation that respondent did not provide a legitimate business purpose for that inquiry. Am I understanding your investigation findings properly?
Yes. I mean, through the course of my investigation, all of the indirect evidence taken as a sum and looked at on a 50-50 standard, to me, suggested that there was targeting. And as for well, I guess it would be almost an incohati offense, in that, that's right, breaking up.
Let me spell that, no.
But that in itself was evidence of a discriminatory act. That if having somebody list out their family and the ages, which is, in my understanding, under HUD policy, a big no-no. Then that ignorance may be indicative of something else. And that the legitimate business interest requested or assumed has to be it's not an easy bar to get over.
My second question has to do with resolving whether in the record it is resolved whether the respondent actually sent the application or required completion of the application from any other tenants in the building. My understanding that at the time of your investigation and the respondent's opportunities to put his answers in the record, he did not provide confirmation that he sent this application to anyone other than the Johnsons in this building.
That is a murky issue, and it shouldn't be. It was asked if others were sent, and the other respondent, I believe, testified to having also completed the application. However, I'm sorry, there was that issue, and then you had said something else.
I was just asking, since it was indeed, I've used your word murky, in the report and in the presentations by the parties today, I thought it remained unresolved as to whether Mr. Auger actually responded directly to your inquiry regarding whether he had sent the application to other parties.
Yeah, and he no. Now, my insight and my questions were, regardless if he sent it just to a complainant or to everyone there, was why did he need to begin with? He had just purchased the property. He knew everybody that was there and had enough information to be able to text them or email them a direct deposit account. So he knew how to receive rent, but then is asking people to do this anyway. And when I asked that question, I really didn't get any sort of positive response.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Gitchos? I do not see any from, yep, Mr. David.
Not for Milo, no. I have a question for council before we take a motion.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up with Mr. Gitchos first. I see nothing else for him. Thanks, Milo. Question for Barbara. Okay.
Yes, Barbara, looking specifically at the recommendations number 4, that he discriminated against the complainants based on familial status, unlawful inquiry, making housing unavailable. I mean, I may be tipping my hand here as to where I'm going and what my concern is. Do we have the ability to delete part of that, specifically making housing unavailable, and leave in unlawful inquiry? 1, can we do that? And 2, does it make any difference? Does it make any difference in terms of the conciliation and the settlement posture as to what the violation was? And I will say, I tangled with this application prohibition back in the summer and was educated that there's a clear, long-standing policy, and you can't do that. I am impressed in this case that he does it with after he's already standing there and knowing that there's a family there with children. But nevertheless, I'm concerned about making housing unavailable in the context that we've already identified about planning the renovation. So my question is, can we delete it, or does it make any difference in terms of how the settlement is viewed in terms of what the violation was?
You cannot delete it. You can make motions, you can separate them out. So you could make one motion as for the unlawful inquiry and one motion for the making housing unavailable. As far as does it make a difference, assuming without knowing that reasonable grounds will be found on at least one of them, the case will still end up in conciliation. As far as will it make a difference down the road if it doesn't settle, and when it comes to relief requested either in conciliation or after conciliation, it might have an effect, but that's not really your concern. Your concern is whether or not you think there's a violation.
Yeah, I can
I guess
understand
the
that it's
other
not
way,
really our concern. Yeah.
the other way it makes a difference is that because this is a HUD case, if it doesn't conciliate, we end up having to litigate, but we litigate only reasonable grounds findings. So it will change what the commission is required to do based on what the recommendations are as far as what counts we need to file. But again, not really important for your purposes. For your purposes, I think the answer is you can make separate motions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So commissioners, at this point, we would be looking for a motion or motions.
Well, I think I'll test the water by making that motion. If there's no second, then I will have my answer. First of all, I would move that we find there's no reasonable grounds. The first two complaints based on race, color, or ancestry, and discriminated against Ms. Kane based on familial status. So I'll make that motion.
So just to be clear, you're making a motion to find no reasonable grounds that either respondent discriminated against the complainants based on race, color, ancestry, or national origin, and to find no reasonable grounds to believe that respondent Diana Kane discriminated against the complainants based on familial status.
Right, and those portions of the complaint should be dismissed. Yes, that's my motion.
Second.
So that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of that motion? Seeing none from commissioners. All those in favor of that motion, commissioners, raise your hand and say yes.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, those findings are both no reasonable grounds.
And then I'm going to make a motion to divide number 4. I'm going to move that we find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that respondent discriminated against complainants based on familial status, unlawful inquiry, period. And that portion of the complaint should be conciliated. And then
wait, hold on.
Do we act on that? And
yep, first you see if there's a second for that.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of that motion among commissioners?
Yes, I mean, I will say again that I learned my lesson that we have a policy and we need to enforce it. I feel that respondent here makes the best case for an exception for him in these circumstances, but that policy's been there for years. You can't do that. That's my discussion.
Commissioner Doosan, you don't need me to call on you. You guys are you're good.
I would like to understand clearly the impact of approving this essentially bifurcated, of approving bifurcation and vote first on the unlawful inquiry. If I wish to be certain that we vote directly on making housing unavailable, would I need to make a second motion?
Not now.
Somebody would need to make a second motion.
We need a motion on that issue anyway, because it's still hanging out there. So
okay,
there will be a motion.
That it's still hanging out there, that by voting yes on this, I am not foregoing or indicating a position on the second matter.
Correct.
Any other discussion on the pending motion? Seeing none. The motion is to find reasonable grounds to believe unlawful discrimination occurred, that Mr. Auger, and I apologize along with all of us for mispronouncing your name if we're doing that, discriminated against complainants based on familial status only with respect to unlawful inquiry. So all those commissioners in favor of that motion, raise your hand and say yes.
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 I see 4 in favor of that motion. So that motion passes. So then we need a motion to deal with the familial status making housing unavailable claim. Commissioner Doosan.
Like to make a motion that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Auger discriminated against Danielle and Johnny Johnson based on familial status, making housing unavailable. And speak slightly to that motion if it gets a second.
Second.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go ahead
moved
and
and
speak.
seconded. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Dusan.
I would just say, I believe that our standard of determining that the complainant has a better than even chance, or stated in the negative as it is in our statutes, has a less than even chance of prevailing. I think that the complainant has the even chance of prevailing on both of these matters. And I would like to see both of these finding on both of these pieces so that conciliation can proceed as to both issues. Both elements of the issue.
Any other discussion from commissioners at this time?
Yeah,
I do
go
have
ahead. Go ahead, Deb.
I do have a question. So, you seconded this, correct, Ed?
No, I did not.
I think you did, or did Jeff?
Jeff did.
I did.
Oh, Jeff did. Okay. Okay. Sorry, then my question doesn't matter. Go ahead, Ed.
No, I intend to vote against it. I think that the standard is that the complainant has to show that reason, renovating the apartment and evicting them to do that, was purely pretextual. And that to me does not seem to survive the factual situation of starting with the contractor from -1 the day before he buys the property, or weeks before he buys the property, and continuing and doing the job for $23,000 8 months later. I don't think that it was a pretext.
If I may, not to be argumentative, just a quick additional point. I am relying on the findings of the investigator who spoke to the parties, reviewed the records, and has recommended how he recommends to the commission that we balance the disagreement amongst the parties as to this issue. And lastly, I just don't think there is any more direct way of making housing unavailable than issuing a notice to quit. And that has to be considered in context of the entire situation.
I realize that this is commissioner discussion, but I need to intervene because, Ed, I don't think your statement of the law was correct. What complainant needs to prove is that this would not have happened but for membership in the protected class. So even if you believe that there was going to be, that the renovation is true, if you think complainant has shown that they would not have been evicted but for their familial status. I know it was an eviction because they were month-to-month tenants, but as shorthand, then that is the reasonable ground standard. And again, it is at least an even chance.
That their burden is to show that they would not have been convicted except for their familial status, correct?
I think conviction is even worse than eviction, but
just eviction, not conviction.
It would not have been served with a notice to quit. Let's go with that.
the old criminal lawyer.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure everyone was using the correct standard.
Yeah, I guess I want to speak. I guess I want to speak really briefly to the motion as well. I'm going to support the motion. The totality of the circumstances in this case do indicate that there's at least an even shot on the part of the complainant. The application, which was apparently, at least from my perspective, there's an even shot that the complainant will show that the application was uniquely given only to the complainant. That's problematic, and it shows something about the state of mind of the respondent. I note there's a finding by the investigator at page 4 that the respondent asserted that he would have evicted the complainants because of complaints from other tenants, which suggests that the noise made by this family was a factor. And it's discrimination to evict or give a notice to quit to a noisy family if they aren't so noisy that their noise would result in an eviction. Does that make sense? Meaning that the respondent was concerned that this family was a bother, that there's at least an even shot to show that that's the case. And then I guess I would suggest, as Ms. Ender has argued, that there are other ways to deal with a family facing renovation in an apartment other than to evict them and to make them homeless. This is a renovation that took a month, I guess, to do, and that month an accommodation could have been made to accommodate both the renovation and the preservation of the complainant's tenancy. And then finally, the way the respondent approached inquiries by the complainant about other available housing in light of the need to leave that apartment, unsatisfactory, and argues toward the even chance standard. So those are the reasons why I'm going to vote in favor of the motion.
Any other discussion from commissioners on this motion? So the pending motion is to find reasonable grounds to believe that Mr. Auger discriminated against the complainants, against Danielle and Johnny Johnson based on familial status due to making housing unavailable. All those commissioners in favor of that motion, raise your hand and say yes.
Yes.
See 2 in favor. All those opposed, raise your hand and say no.
No.
The vote is, let me just write down. The vote is tied 2-2 under the currently applicable commission standard. If it's a tie vote, there's a default finding of no reasonable grounds. So unless someone wants to make another motion, you're welcome to do that. My guess is that we'll end up in the same tie. So I don't see any additional motions forthcoming. That means that there are 3 no reasonable grounds findings and 1 reasonable grounds finding here, and the commission will send a letter to the parties and council outlining the next steps for conciliation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you and have a great day. Appreciate the
Thank
commission's
you.
time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So
shall we move on to our last case? Okay.
Yes.
So the last case is a public accommodations case, PA 19-0138 ABC. Is there anybody here for the complainant?
I have not seen anything.
Timothy Damian?
I haven't seen, we haven't been contacted by him, and I haven't seen him here, so I believe he has chosen not to appear.
So in these cases, we.
You know what, I think it would be helpful. We do record this in case later on Mr. Damian wants to watch the ASL version. I would like to have the interpreters interpret this part of the proceeding. And they have asked if the commissioners could briefly introduce themselves for the interpretation. That would be great.
Okay, I'll start then. Deb Whitworth.
And if you give the interpreter just a second to fingerspell your names.
Sure.
I'm Jeff Ashby.
My name is Ed David.
And I am Jill Duson, D-U-S-O-N.
So the case has been called, and the complainant, Timothy Damian, did not appear. He is not on screen and has not left a voicemail or email at our office indicating difficulty signing on to the meeting. Chair Whitworth, do you want to proceed?
So typically in these cases, we simply take a vote and we don't hear arguments. So is there a motion to move forward?
Just to clarify, if I might, typically when no one appears, the commission moves to adopt the recommended decision. So typically there would be a motion or motions to adopt the recommended findings. Is that what you were suggesting,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitworth?
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Didn't have the right words.
I'll move that we adopt the recommended findings if there's no reasonable grounds to believe that
Commissioner,
discrimination.
sorry, hold on. Commissioner David, that was Commissioner David for the interpretation.
I'll move that we adopt the findings of the investigator in PA 19-138 and find that there's no reasonable grounds to believe that unlawful discrimination existed and that the case be dismissed.
Is there a second?
Just hold on one sec. The interpreter's still working on it. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
That's Commissioner Ashby.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 So the vote is unanimous. All four commissioners voted in favor of the motion to find no reasonable grounds to believe unlawful discrimination occurred in this case. So the commission will send a letter to the parties and the lawyers, telling them the next steps in the Maine Human Rights, that the Maine Human Rights Act offers. And thank you to the counsel for respondents who have been here throughout the meeting, and to the interpreters. So that is the end of the hearing on that case. And that's actually the end of our hearing list. So I think at this point, Commissioner, do you want to take 5 before we go into executive session?
Sure.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else is welcome to hang around while we take a break, but then we're going to go into executive session. Thank you, interpreters. Bye, Mary. Bye, Meryl. Now, Jill, I forgot to ask, as the newest commissioner, shall I sign your name on the conciliation agreements?
Sure.
Usually it's the new guy, whoever that is. Ed's been
Okay.
signing them for a while, so now I think it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Does that mean I also, as the newest commissioner, but returning to the commission, do I have to bring baked goods if we ever meet in person?
No, we're not the legislature. We don't do that. But if you want to, we will love them. Nothing has changed since you worked here. We are still just as food motivated as
Yes.
we were before.
I recall that.
Nothing has changed about that.
You won't be the newest by the time we get there.
Oh, that's true.
That's right. You could have the shortest tenure as the new guy. Yeah.
I believe that she was confirmed by judiciary, but hasn't gotten to the Senate calendar yet.
Oh, did she have a hearing?
I had heard that through sources that she was confirmed by judiciary, but maybe that's
Whoa.
not true. And if that's correct, then it's just has to get gavelled through.
Oh,
I mean, I assume it was unanimous, but I don't know that.
wow. It is unlike me to miss a hearing.
Well, I go there with trepidation, but that's what I heard.
I will check it out. If that's the case, I will owe her many, many apologies for having missed the whole thing.
Oh, that's right. You would have been there. Yeah, that doesn't. I take it back.
Usually somebody would let me know.
Somebody would have let you know. Yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you showed up and were very helpful. Yeah.
I show up. It's one of my main strengths is I show up.
85% of life is showing up.
That's right. Okay, so we need a motion. Oh wait, do we have everybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we need a motion to go into executive session that references the key parts of the FOIA statute. It should be in your materials, the wording of the motion.
Oh, okay. I'll take it back.
I don't want to go look for the wording because I've got the report in front of me.
Right. Here, I've got it. Pursuant to 1 MRS section 4056E, I move to go into executive session to consult with our attorney regarding pending and contemplated litigation and the legal rights and duties of the commission.
Well done,
Second.
Deb.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say yes, please.
Yes.
Excellent job. All right. Now I'm going to move you theoretically into the executive session. Let's see what happens. Could go horribly wrong. Now, Mel, I think you and I have to join that affirmatively.
I can try.
Okay, do we have, all right, so we're back in open session, and I don't believe we have any things we have to vote on post executive session. The only thing left is to discuss, hopefully you guys have an hour or thereabouts that we could do some discussion of process. I didn't tell you ahead of time, which is on me. Is everyone able to do that for about an hour, like say like noon to 1? Is that possible? Yeah?
Yes, I'd be willing to start at quarter up too. I mean,
I wouldn't be. Noon is good.
Okay.
All right,
Noon
so,
is fine.
okay, so then I believe, I don't even think we need a motion to adjourn, but you're welcome to do one. Nope, no motion needed. So then everybody log off and I'll send you a new link and see you at 12. How about that? All right, great. Thank you.